Hey guys, welcome back to our Tekkit tutorial series. We're going to be finally covering nuclear power.
Yep, so what you want to do is compress uranium ore to get refined uranium.
Now this is the first thing you're going to need to do because you're going to be making some uranium fuel cells.
And the power you get from nuclear power is from the uranium cells.
But yeah, the uranium cells are sort of like the basic main component. And we've got some here, and we've also got some coolant cells. Now you just need to put the refined uranium next to to an empty cell to get a uranium cell.
And these don't stack, so make sure you have a space in your inventory.
The second thing we're going to make is some coolant cells. Now these effectively cool the reactor so that it doesn't overheat and blow up.
And to make them, you place water cells in an extractor.
Now to make a water cell, if you forget, you can just put a water bucket next to an empty cell.
Yep.
Now that we've got our coolant cells, we're going to start making the main components of the reactor.
Yep, nuclear power is the best power in the game, so it's very worth it.
Yeah, it's especially quite good when you know what you're doing, so that's why we're helping you guys out.
And it uses a lot of advanced alloys.
So the first thing we're going to need to make is some integrated reactor plating.
Yep. And these are used both in the recipe and inside the reactor itself.
So what we're going to be doing here is getting a ton of these. We're going to need quite a few because they're used in a lot of the main components for the machines that we're going to be making here.
And they have some effects that help your nuclear power as well.
So once you've got a bunch of these, we're going to be making some integrated heat dispensers.
And these are also used in the recipe, but they'll dispense the heat around the reactor.
So here's the recipe right here for integrated heat dispensers. We're going to need at least a couple of these for each reactor chamber, and we're going to need a couple reactor chambers for the main reactor.
Yep. You want 2 reactor chambers to make the reactor machine, and you also want 6 reactor chambers to add on to the machine.
So if you're not prepared for this, it's a quite expensive endeavor to start nuclear power, but it's really, really helpful in the end.
Yeah, just make sure you have all the materials at the beginning, and then you can go all out on it.
So this is the reactor chamber here, and we're going to need at least 2 of these to make the main reactor.
You also need a generator.
So here's the recipe we're going to show you in a sec for the main nuclear reactor. It's got 2 reactor chambers on the side, generator, the advanced circuits, and some alloys.
Yep, and this is where the power is created.
So to protect your area from being damaged from the explosion from the reactor in case, something bad happens, we're going to be making some reinforced stone and glass.
And these both have 150 blast resistance, so they'll stop, not fully stop, but they'll reduce the damage made by the explosion.
If you want to fully stop it, you can make a double wall of it, and it'll almost fully stop it if you just have a single wall.
Yeah, it is still pretty dangerous, so watch out and make sure you have the right setup.
So we're going to be making a ton of these reinforced materials and taking some recipes and some different things down to the basement for us, where we're going to be making our reactor.
And this is a reinforced door, which works like a normal door, but it needs a redstone signal, so it works like an iron door.
But it's also got the blast resistance of the other objects.
Yep.
So we're going to want to suspend our reactor here, so we're just going to place a block down, and then to add the different chambers onto the reactor, we're going to hold shift and then click it, and that way we don't bring up the interface.
You can put a reactor chamber on all sides of the reactor.
And that effectively just increases the area that you can see into the reactor, and that lets you put more stuff into it.
Yeah, it'll increase the interface.
So we're just going to put 6 all around, and we suggest doing this because it also helps with the cooling as well.
Right, so uranium cells is where you get the power from. Each uranium cell will last 200,000 game ticks, which is equal to 166 minutes or 8 Minecraft days.
Now they create heat and energy every pulse, and what a pulse is it's just 1 second, and every second the thing makes 5 EUs per tick, and it also just creates power and heat.
Yep. So the generator outputs extreme high voltage, so we want to use the high insulated cable.
And as well, we're also going to need a high voltage transformer to transform that extreme voltage into high voltage for our MFSU.
Yep. The FSU can only take 512, so you want to break it down or it will blow up.
Right, so talking about the uranium cells again, they can create 1 million EU on their own without any sort of efficiency upgrades, I guess.
Yep. There are several factors that will increase the lifetime, but we'll not go over them yet.
So each uranium cell on its own without any cooling at all will produce 10 heat per pulse. Remember, that's 1 second to the hull. And the hull of a reactor is sort of its main component.
Yep.
The hull can hold up to 10,000 heat before blowing up.
If the heat gets to 10,000, then it will blow up, making a massive hole.
Right.
Each reactor chamber adds 1,000 to the heat capacity. So with a reactor with all 6 chambers, will hold up to 16,000 heat.
Now, heat can be dissipated many ways, including the integrated heat dispensers, coolant cells, but also the reactor itself. Now, the reactor dissipates 1 heat per pulse, and as well the reactor chambers reduce 2 heat per pulse. So with just the reactor and its 6 chambers, it can get rid of 13 heat per pulse.
Effectively being able to put only one uranium cell with no cooling and it will not blow up.
So that's something not a lot of people say. It's good to know, because if you don't have any cooling or you can't afford the materials for it or whatever, you can just put one in anyway and you can go ahead.
As you can see, it's making power there, very slowly, but we don't have the best setup yet.
Now, something to remember, if you put a uranium cell next to another uranium cell, they will both pulse twice per regular second.
So
this will not reduce their lifespan, though. So that means they can create that much more EU in their lifespan without having to worry about, it reducing the pulse time.
And this is called the efficiency. It can be increased furthermore, but we'll not go over it in this video.
So the best setup for that would be to have one uranium cell surrounded by one on each of its side, which would make it have 5 million EU in its life. Now remember, that's an incredible amount of heat, because if it double pulses, it makes heat twice. And so the amount of heat, you can't really dissipate it, and it's really hard to deal with. We're going to show you guys some different builds for this over the next little while, but this is just the main, how everything works. We're going to show you.
Also, air around the reactor in a 3x3 cube will take heat off. So every block of air will take 1/4 of the heat. So 4 blocks will take 1 heat off.
As well, if you put water like we just did, each water block will take 1 heat off. Now the reactor, with all of its expansion chambers and water surrounding all sides, will cool 33 heat per pulse.
So you can have 3 uranium cells with no cooling, as long as they're not beside each other, and it will not overheat.
Now each reactor expansion chamber that you add adds 1,000 maximum heat to the reactor. So with all 6, it can hold up to 16,000 before blowing up.
Yep. The cooling cells, which are the blue ones, will cool themselves 1 heat per second.
Now there is a chart, we're going to annotate it into the video, and it shows you how much cooling cells to how much heat each uranium cell makes. So the amount of heat it makes depends on the cooling. So with 4 coolant cells, one on each side of the uranium cell, 1 heat goes to each, and each dissipates 1 heat every pulse. So that means that the coolant cells are not depleted, and they just dissipate the heat completely.
And that is what you want for a completely safe reactor, because all the heat is dissipated, you will not get overheating.
Now, as you can see on the chart, with 3 coolant cells, only 2 heat goes to each. With 2, 4 heat goes to each. With 1, 10 heat goes to each. And with 0, all the heat goes to the hull.
So yeah, make sure you have some cooling, otherwise it'll probably blow up.
Now the integrated heat dispensers, as well as being in our recipes, can also go in the reactor. Now you can put them next to a uranium cell, and they'll sort of extend the range that it can cool.
Yep, it will spread the heat around to cooling cells around it.
So what you can do is put it on one side of the uranium cell, and then the sides of the heat dispenser will add heat to each of the coolant cells. The way the heat dispenser works is it tries to sort of balance all the heat between the hull, the coolant cells around it, and just the dispenser itself.
Yeah. For example, if the hull has more heat than a coolant cell, then it'll try to send heat from the hull to the coolant cell.
And as well, the same works the other way. If there's lots of heat in one of the coolant cells, then it'll try and balance it and make the coolant cell itself and the hull all equal. That's sort of its job. Now, to do this, it can take up to 25 and add up to 25 from or to the hull and redistribute it to each adjacent cell.
For up to 6.
So it can add or take away 6 from each cell touching it.
Next, there's the reactor plating, and these ones will also add 100 heat to the reactor resistance. So if you only have one, it would last 10,000 and 100.
Yeah, so it's not the most useful thing, but it also sort of works as a really less advanced integrated heat dispenser. So what it does is it automatically takes the heat and redistributes it, but when it takes heat, it cools at a rate of 0.1 heat per pulse. That's really slow.
Yep.
So we recommend mainly using it for the resistance and maybe not using it at all. It's not the most useful thing.
Yep. All the cooling systems can take up to 10,000 heat before melting down or draining.
That includes the coolant cells as well as the integrated heat dispenser.
And here we just made a reactor that's going to blow up.
So we're going to put a ton of uranium cells in here. Now remember, each one that's touching another one is double pulsing, as well as it's just going crazy. There's no cooling, there's nothing dealing with all this heat.
Yeah, there'll be fire around it.
You'll start to notice that things will start to burn. The water, if there was water around it, would dissipate, and it's going to blow up. Now I've made my little house here, but it's not the most safe thing. I'm really close to the reactor, and there it goes.
One thing you could have done to stop this is send a redstone signal, and it will completely lock the reactor and it will completely stop it until you send another signal.
So if you send a redstone signal, it locks all of the cells and no more heat is created until it's dissipated. So that's a really good sort of safety procedure. And you can also hook it up to redstone timers and different stuff like that. We're going to be showing you those in the more builds coming soon.
Yep. And as you can see, there's the massive hole made by the reactor.
And what's kind of cool is if you look at where the wall was that I was hiding behind, it may not have, saved me completely. I got a little hurt. But if you look at all the land that's behind it, none of it was affected.
Yep. So this area here still has the grass, unlike the area beside it.
So this is really, really quite devastating, and you don't want that to happen to you. So remember to double protect your walls, or do whatever you can, make it underground, try and make it safe so that you don't get blown up.
Yep. So we'll have future videos on nuclear power showing the different types of reactors.
So there are different types, and they're called marks, and they have different efficiency levels versus how safe it is. So some require a cooldown, some are different. Be sure to look for those videos, and we'll have them very soon.
Yep. So we'll see you later with a future video.
Thanks very much. Comment, rate, subscribe, and we'll see you soon.